Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
What if everything you've been told about twin flame union is only half the story? For many people on the twin flame journey, the idea of union feels like the ultimate happy ending. It's imagined as the moment when everything finally falls into place. The pain of separation disappears, the confusion fades away, and the two souls who have longed for each other finally come together in perfect harmony. In that vision, union looks almost magical. Two people meet again. They recognize each other instantly. Their love is effortless, pure, and endlessly romantic. There are no more misunderstandings, no more emotional triggers, no more painful lessons. Just peace, passion, and a sense of finally being home. But here's the uncomfortable question that few people ask. What if twin flame union is not a fairy tale at all? What if the moment that many people see as the finish line is actually the beginning of an even deeper journey? The truth is that the romantic fantasy surrounding twin flame union is one of the biggest misconceptions in the spiritual community. It's not necessarily wrong, but it's incomplete. Because while union can be beautiful, meaningful, and deeply transformative, it is not perfect. And it was never meant to be. To understand this, we first need to look at where the fairy tale expectation comes from. Human beings have always loved stories about destined love. From ancient myths to modern movies, we are constantly told that somewhere out there is the one, the person who will complete us, the person who will finally make everything feel right. Think about the countless romantic narratives we grew up with. Two people meet against all odds. They face challenges. They almost lose each other. But in the end, love conquers everything. The story ends with a kiss, a reunion, or a promise that they will live happily ever after. But notice something important about these stories. They always end at the moment of reunion. The credits roll right when the real relationship would begin. We never see what happens 5 years later. Or 10. We don't see the difficult conversations, the moments of emotional vulnerability, the personal struggles each person continues to face. And yet, in real life, love doesn't end at the reunion. It begins there. The same illusion often appears in the way people talk about twin flame union. Many believe that once the separation phase ends and the twin flames finally come together, all the pain will vanish. The runner will stop running. The chaser will stop chasing. All fears, insecurities, and emotional wounds will somehow dissolve. The relationship will become calm, harmonious, and permanently blissful. But if you pause for a moment and think about the true purpose of the twin flame connection, this idea starts to feel a little strange. Twin flames are often described as mirrors of the soul. They reflect our deepest wounds, our hidden fears, and the parts of ourselves we may not want to face. This mirroring is what makes the journey so intense. So if the connection was designed to trigger growth and transformation, why would that process suddenly stop the moment union happens? Why would two souls who have spent years confronting their shadows suddenly become completely perfect versions of themselves? The reality is much more grounded, and in many ways much more meaningful. Twin flame union does not turn two human beings into flawless partners. It brings two evolving souls into the same space, so they can continue growing together. That means the relationship doesn't become easier in the way many people expect. Instead, it becomes more conscious. In a typical relationship, many problems remain hidden. People avoid difficult conversations, suppress emotions, or simply ignore deeper issues. But in a twin flame connection, that kind of avoidance becomes almost impossible. The bond is too intense. The emotional awareness between the two people is too strong. When something is out of balance, both partners can feel it. When one person withdraws emotionally, the other senses the distance. When old fears resurface, they don't stay buried for long. First, this can feel confusing, even disappointing. Someone might think, I thought union was supposed to feel peaceful all the time. But the truth is that peace in a twin flame connection does not come from avoiding challenges. It comes from learning how to face them together. Imagine two people who have spent years apart, working through their own healing, personal growth, and spiritual awakening. When they finally come into union, there can indeed be a powerful sense of recognition, a feeling of familiarity, a quiet inner voice saying, "This person is part of my soul's journey." But that recognition does not erase the complexity of being human. Each person still carries their personality, their life experiences, their habits, and their emotional patterns. And sometimes those patterns can still collide. For example, one partner may have a deep fear of abandonment due to past experiences. The other partner may struggle with vulnerability and emotional expression. When these two patterns meet, they can trigger each other in powerful ways. The fear of abandonment might appear whenever the other person needs space. The difficulty with vulnerability might surface whenever deep emotional conversations arise. From the outside, someone might look at this dynamic and think, that doesn't look like a spiritual love story. But in reality, it may be exactly what the twin flame connection is meant to do. Because each of these moments creates an opportunity for growth. Instead of running away from the trigger, both partners are invited to look at it. Instead of blaming each other, they can begin to ask deeper questions. Why does this situation affect me so strongly? What part of my past is being activated right now? What is this experience trying to teach me? This is where the true power of twin flame union begins to reveal itself. Not as a perfect romance, but as a sacred partnership in evolution. In many ways, the journey after union requires even more maturity than the journey before it. During separation, growth often happens individually. Each person works through their own lessons in their own space. But in union, the growth becomes shared. Now the lessons appear within the relationship itself. Communication becomes essential. Emotional honesty becomes unavoidable. Personal accountability becomes necessary. And sometimes that can feel uncomfortable, because growth rarely happens inside the comfort zone. Yet something remarkable also happens when two people choose to stay present through these moments. The relationship begins to deepen in a way that goes far beyond romance. Trust becomes stronger, not because there are no problems, but because both partners learn they can face those problems together. Intimacy becomes richer, not just through passion, but through emotional transparency. Love becomes more grounded, not as an idealized fantasy, but as a conscious choice made again and again. In this sense, twin flame union is not the end of the story. It is the point where the real story finally begins. A story that is not written in perfect lines or predictable chapters. A story that includes moments of joy, vulnerability, growth, and sometimes even difficulty. But also a story that allows two souls to evolve side by side. So the next time you hear someone describe twin flame union as a fairy tale ending, it might be worth asking a different question. What if the beauty of this connection is not found in perfection, but in the courage of two people who continue growing together, even when the journey is not easy? Because sometimes the most sacred kind of love is not the one that feels like magic all the time. It's the one that invites you to become the most honest, aware, and authentic version of yourself. And that kind of love was never meant to be a fairy tale. It was meant to be real. Before we can understand why twin flame union often feels different from what people expect, we need to look at a deeper question. Why do so many people believe that union will feel like a perfect fairy tale in the first place? Where does this expectation come from? For most people on the twin flame journey, the belief that union will bring endless happiness does not appear randomly. It is shaped by several powerful influences: romantic storytelling, social conditioning, and even certain interpretations within spiritual communities. All of these influences quietly create the same idea, that somewhere in the future, there is a moment when everything will finally be perfect. And that moment is called union. From a very young age, many of us are taught to see love through the lens of destiny and completion. Think about the stories we hear as children. The prince searches for the princess. Two lovers are separated by obstacles. But in the end, love conquers everything. When they finally reunite, the story ends with the famous phrase, "And they lived happily ever after." What's interesting about this phrase is what it leaves out. It never explains what happily ever after actually looks like. We don't see the ordinary days. We don't see the disagreements. We don't see two people learning how to communicate, compromise, and grow together. The reunion is presented as the ultimate solution, the moment when all problems disappear. Over time, this narrative becomes deeply rooted in our subconscious understanding of love. So when people encounter the concept of twin flames later in life, the mind naturally places it inside the same story structure. Twin flames are often described as two halves of the same soul, a destined connection, a love that transcends time and space. When someone hears these descriptions, it's easy to imagine that the final stage of the journey must be something extraordinary, a moment of perfect emotional harmony, a love so powerful that it removes all suffering. In this sense, union becomes more than just a relationship milestone. It becomes a symbol, a promise that all the pain of the journey will eventually be rewarded with a perfect ending. But there is another factor that strengthens this expectation even more: the way the twin flame journey is often discussed online. In many spiritual communities, union is portrayed as the ultimate goal. Videos, articles, and discussions frequently focus on questions like, when will union happen? What are the signs that union is close? How can you attract your twin flame back? These conversations often create the impression that once union arrives, the journey is complete, that the difficult part is over, that everything becomes peaceful from that moment forward. And to be fair, this belief is understandable. After all, the separation phase of the twin flame journey can be incredibly painful. Many people experience intense emotional triggers, deep longing, and periods of confusion or loneliness. During these moments, it's natural for the mind to look for relief, to imagine a future where the struggle finally ends. Union begins to represent that relief. It becomes the light at the end of the tunnel, the moment when the heart can finally rest. But here's an important question that often goes unasked. What if the purpose of the twin flame journey was never about reaching a perfect ending? What if the purpose was transformation itself? If we look closely at the experiences many people have during the twin flame journey, a pattern begins to emerge. The connection constantly pushes individuals toward growth. Old emotional wounds surface. Unhealthy relationship patterns become impossible to ignore. Fears that once remained hidden suddenly appear in the open. For some, the journey triggers a deep process of self-discovery. They begin healing childhood wounds. They start questioning long-held beliefs about love and self-worth. They learn to set boundaries, develop emotional independence, and build a stronger relationship with themselves. None of these changes happen easily. In fact, they often happen precisely because the connection challenges the person so deeply. Now consider what this means. If the twin flame connection is designed to accelerate personal growth, why would that process suddenly stop at union? Why would the most transformative connection in someone's life suddenly become effortless and static? Growth does not work that way. Human beings are always evolving. Our awareness expands over time. New layers of healing appear as we move through different stages of life. So when two twin flames come into union, they are not arriving at a final destination. They are entering a new phase of the same evolutionary process. But this time they are walking the path together. This is where the fairy tale expectation begins to shift. Because instead of a perfect ending, union becomes something much more dynamic. It becomes a relationship where growth continues to unfold, sometimes in beautiful ways, and sometimes in challenging ones. First, this realization can feel surprising. Some people might even feel disappointed. They may think, if union isn't perfect, then what makes it special? But the answer lies in understanding the difference between fantasy and depth. A fantasy relationship appears perfect because it avoids complexity. Real relationships become meaningful because they embrace it. In a typical romantic fantasy, love is shown through grand gestures, passionate declarations, dramatic reunions, and constant emotional intensity. But in reality, love often reveals itself through quieter moments, through patience, through honest communication, through the willingness to stay present even when things feel uncomfortable. The same is true in a twin flame union. The connection may still contain deep love, spiritual resonance, and a powerful sense of recognition. But it also exists within the ordinary rhythm of life. There are responsibilities. There are personal goals and individual paths. There are moments when one partner is struggling with something internal. There are times when both people must learn how to support each other without losing themselves. This is not a flaw in the connection. It is the very thing that makes the relationship real. And ironically, it is often far more powerful than the fairy tale people imagine. Because when two people learn to grow together, not because everything is easy, but because they are committed to evolving, that creates a bond that goes much deeper than romance alone. It becomes a partnership. a space where both individuals can continue becoming the most authentic versions of themselves. So perhaps the expectation of a fairy tale union comes from a very human place: the desire for peace, the hope that love will finally remove all suffering. But the deeper wisdom of the twin flame journey suggests something different. Love does not erase life's challenges. Instead, it gives us the courage to face them with greater awareness. Union, in this sense, is not the moment when the story ends. It is the moment when two people realize that the journey of growth, healing, and transformation is something they are now ready to share. Not as characters in a perfect story, but as two evolving souls learning how to walk forward together. When people first hear about twin flame union, many imagine it as the moment when everything finally becomes perfect. All the confusion disappears. All the emotional pain fades away. All the misunderstandings dissolve. Two souls reunite, and from that moment forward, life flows effortlessly. But the deeper truth about twin flame union is something very different. Union does not mean perfection. And perhaps more importantly, it was never meant to. To understand why, we first need to remember something essential about the twin flame journey. Even though the connection is spiritual and deeply transformative, the two people involved are still human beings. They still have personalities. They still carry memories from the past. They still have emotional patterns shaped by years of experiences, relationships, and personal struggles. No matter how powerful the spiritual bond may be, union does not erase these human aspects of life. Instead, it brings two evolving individuals into a space where they can continue growing together. This is an important distinction, because many people assume that once union happens, both partners will suddenly become the highest versions of themselves. They imagine two completely healed individuals who no longer carry insecurities, fears, or emotional triggers. But real growth rarely happens in such a clean and complete way. Healing is not a single moment of transformation. It is a process that unfolds layer by layer. Often, when one layer is healed, another deeper one appears. This is true for every human being. And it remains true even for twin flames. In fact, when two twin flames come into union, the closeness of the relationship can sometimes reveal new layers of healing that were not visible before. Why? Because intimacy has a unique way of bringing hidden emotions to the surface. When you share your life closely with another person, your time, your thoughts, your vulnerability, it becomes harder to hide the parts of yourself that still need attention. Imagine two individuals who have spent years working on their personal growth during separation. They may have developed stronger self-awareness. They may have healed certain past wounds. They may have learned to become more independent and emotionally grounded. But when they finally enter union, the relationship itself becomes a new mirror. And mirrors do not only reflect beauty, they reflect everything. Sometimes that reflection can feel incredibly affirming. You may feel deeply understood by your twin flame in ways you have never experienced with anyone else. You may sense a profound emotional resonance that creates moments of incredible closeness. But at other times, the mirror may reveal something more challenging: a hidden insecurity, a fear of rejection, a tendency to withdraw during emotional conflict, or perhaps an old pattern of needing validation from the other person. These moments can feel confusing at first. Someone might think, "I thought we were supposed to be in union now. Why am I still feeling triggered?" But this question assumes that union is meant to eliminate growth. In reality, union simply changes the way growth happens. During separation, much of the healing occurs individually. Each person works through their lessons alone, often guided by the intensity of the connection, even when the other person is not physically present. But in union, growth becomes relational. The lessons appear within the interaction between the two people. For example, imagine that one partner has a deep fear of abandonment due to past experiences. Even if they have already worked on this fear during separation, being in a close relationship again may activate that fear in subtle ways. If the other partner becomes distant for a day or two because of work stress or personal reflection, the old fear might resurface. Not because the relationship is unhealthy, but because the emotional pattern still exists somewhere within the person's inner world. At the same time, the other partner may be facing their own challenges. Perhaps they struggle with expressing vulnerability. Perhaps they are used to processing emotions privately before sharing them with others. Now imagine these two dynamics interacting within the same relationship. One person seeks reassurance and closeness. The other needs moments of solitude to process emotions. Without awareness, this situation could easily lead to misunderstandings. But within a conscious twin flame union, these moments become opportunities for growth rather than reasons for separation. Instead of repeating old patterns, both partners are invited to pause and reflect. What is this situation revealing about me? Is my reaction coming from the present moment, or from something unresolved in the past? How can I communicate my needs honestly without blaming the other person? These questions shift the focus away from perfection and toward awareness. And awareness is where true transformation begins. Another important truth about union is that life itself continues to unfold. The relationship does not exist in isolation from the world. There are careers to build, responsibilities to manage, families to interact with, and personal goals to pursue. There may be moments when external stress affects the emotional dynamic between the partners. Financial concerns, health challenges, life transitions. All of these experiences can influence the relationship, just as they would in any partnership. But what makes a twin flame union unique is not the absence of these challenges. It is the depth of consciousness that the connection invites. Instead of seeing difficulties as signs that the relationship is failing, the partners begin to see them as part of the shared path. A chance to practice patience. A chance to deepen communication. A chance to support each other while still maintaining personal responsibility for one's own growth. In this way, the idea of perfection gradually transforms into something more meaningful. Perfection suggests a static state, something flawless and unchanging. But real love is dynamic. It evolves. It deepens through experience. It becomes stronger not because nothing ever goes wrong, but because both people learn how to navigate challenges together. Think about the difference between an idealized love story and a real partnership. In an idealized story, everything feels magical at the beginning. The characters fall in love, and the narrative ends before any real difficulties appear. But in real life, the strength of a relationship is measured over time. Through moments of uncertainty, through personal growth, through the decision to keep choosing each other even as both individuals continue evolving. Twin flame union operates within this same reality. It is not the disappearance of human imperfection. It is the willingness to grow beyond it. And strangely enough, this is what makes the connection far more powerful than any fairy tale. Because fairy tales rely on perfection. But sacred partnerships are built through authenticity. When two people can be honest about their fears, their weaknesses, and their ongoing growth, the relationship becomes a space of genuine transformation. Instead of pretending to be perfect, they learn to be real. Instead of expecting the other person to complete them, they support each other's individual evolution. And instead of chasing an idealized version of love, they begin to experience something deeper. A connection that grows stronger not in spite of imperfection but through it. So if you ever find yourself questioning why union does not feel like the flawless fantasy you once imagined, consider a different perspective. Perhaps the purpose of this connection was never to create a perfect story. Perhaps it was meant to create a conscious one. A relationship where love is not defined by the absence of challenges, but by the courage to keep evolving together. One of the most persistent beliefs about twin flame union is that it will feel endlessly romantic. Many people imagine that once union happens, the relationship will be filled with constant passion, deep emotional closeness, and magical moments that never seem to fade. Every conversation will feel meaningful. Every day will feel exciting. Every interaction will carry the same intensity as the first moment of recognition. In this vision, love is always dramatic, always powerful, always glowing with the same emotional electricity that people often feel at the beginning of the twin flame journey. But real relationships, even the most sacred ones, do not operate that way. And understanding this truth is an important step in seeing twin flame union clearly. The idea of constant romance is another expectation shaped by cultural storytelling. Movies, novels, and social media often present love through a series of emotionally intense moments. The focus is usually on passion, attraction, and dramatic reunions. What these stories rarely show is the quiet, ordinary rhythm of everyday life. They rarely show the morning routines. Yet those moments are not the absence of love. They are the environment where real love learns how to live. When two twin flames come into union, their connection may still carry an undeniable depth. The sense of familiarity between them can be profound. Conversations may feel unusually honest. The emotional bond may feel stronger than anything they have experienced before. But the relationship still exists within the same reality as any other partnership. There are responsibilities to handle. There are schedules to manage. There are individual goals and personal spaces that both partners must maintain. At times, one partner may be deeply focused on work or personal growth. At other times, the other partner may need solitude to process emotions or regain balance. These moments can sometimes surprise people who expected union to feel like a constant romantic adventure. Someone might think, why does this feel so normal? But this normal quality is not a failure of the connection. It is actually a sign that the relationship has moved beyond fantasy and into something sustainable. Constant emotional intensity is not something the human nervous system can maintain forever. In fact, when a relationship remains in a permanently heightened emotional state, it can eventually become exhausting. True intimacy is not built only through intense moments of passion. It is built through presence during ordinary life. Think about the difference between fireworks and a steady flame. Fireworks are bright, dramatic, and exciting. They capture attention and create moments of awe, but they only last for a short time. A steady flame, on the other hand, burns quietly. It may not attract the same dramatic attention, but it provides warmth, stability, and continuity. Many people imagine twin flame union as endless fireworks. But in reality, the connection often evolves into something closer to a steady flame. And that steady flame can be far more powerful than momentary excitement. Because it means the love between two people is strong enough to exist even when nothing extraordinary is happening. Another reason the myth of constant romance can be misleading is that it overlooks the role of emotional maturity in a twin flame union. During the earlier stages of the journey, the connection often feels intense because it activates deep emotional patterns. The push and pull dynamic, the longing during separation, and the powerful recognition between the two souls can create dramatic emotional highs and lows. But as both individuals grow, the relationship naturally begins to stabilize. This does not mean the love becomes weaker. It means the love becomes more grounded. Instead of being driven by emotional turbulence, the connection begins to operate from a place of awareness and mutual respect. Romantic gestures may still exist. There may still be moments of passion, laughter, and deep emotional closeness. But those moments are no longer the only foundation of the relationship. The foundation becomes something deeper: consistency, trust, and shared growth. Imagine a couple who has finally reached union after years of separation and personal transformation. At the beginning, the reunion might feel incredibly emotional. They may talk for hours, sharing the experiences that shaped them during their time apart. They may feel a profound sense of relief that the long period of distance has finally ended. But after those first intense moments pass, life begins to settle into a rhythm. They wake up early for work. They cook meals together or sometimes separately. They manage daily responsibilities. They experience good days and stressful days. Sometimes they feel deeply connected. Other times they may be quiet and focused on their own inner worlds. None of these moments are less meaningful simply because they are ordinary. In fact, the ability to share everyday life with someone in a peaceful and authentic way is often one of the deepest expressions of love. It means the relationship is not dependent on constant excitement to survive. It means the connection can exist comfortably within the natural flow of life. Another important aspect of this reality is that romance itself evolves over time. In the early stages of attraction, romance often appears through dramatic gestures, long conversations late at night, spontaneous adventures, passionate declarations of love. But as a relationship matures, romance often becomes quieter. It may appear in small acts of care, listening when the other person needs to speak, supporting each other during stressful moments, respecting each other's personal boundaries, choosing kindness even during disagreements. These gestures may not look dramatic from the outside, but they create a deeper form of intimacy, because they show that love is not just a feeling that appears during special moments. It is a practice that continues even when life becomes complex. In a twin flame union, this practice can become especially meaningful because both partners understand the purpose of their connection. They recognize that the relationship is not just about emotional fulfillment. It is about growth, awareness, and shared evolution. So instead of expecting constant romance, they begin to appreciate the balance between passion and stability. They understand that love can be intense at times and peaceful at others. They learn to value the quiet moments just as much as the dramatic ones. A simple conversation over dinner, a supportive message during a difficult day, a moment of silence that feels comfortable rather than awkward. These experiences may not resemble the fairy tale version of love that many people imagine, but they reflect something far more sustainable. A relationship where two people can truly exist as themselves, where romance is not forced or performed, but allowed to appear naturally within the rhythm of life. And perhaps this is one of the most important lessons about twin flame union. The connection does not remain in the dreamlike world of constant emotional intensity. It enters the real world. And in doing so, it gains something far more valuable than endless romance. It gains depth. Because when love learns how to live within the ordinary moments of life, it becomes something that can truly last. Not just as a beautiful idea, but as a living, evolving experience shared between two souls who continue growing together. One of the most powerful, and sometimes most misunderstood aspects of the twin flame journey is the mirror effect. People often hear that twin flames are mirrors of each other. They reflect the deepest parts of the soul, revealing hidden wounds, unhealed emotions, and unconscious patterns that have been carried for years. During the earlier stages of the journey, this mirroring can feel intense and even overwhelming. Many people experience emotional triggers that seem to appear out of nowhere. A simple interaction with their twin flame can suddenly bring up feelings of insecurity, abandonment, jealousy, or fear. First, these reactions can be confusing. Someone might think, "Why does this person affect me so deeply?" The answer lies in the unique nature of the twin flame connection. Unlike ordinary relationships, this bond has a way of reaching into the deepest layers of a person's emotional and psychological world. It doesn't just reflect the parts of you that feel strong and confident. It also reflects the parts that still need healing. Because of this, many people assume that once union finally happens, the mirroring will stop. After all, if both partners have done their inner work and reached a place of spiritual maturity, shouldn't the triggers disappear? Shouldn't the relationship finally feel calm and effortless? But the reality is more complex. The mirror effect does not disappear after union. In fact, in some ways it can become even more refined. This may sound surprising, but it makes sense when we consider the purpose of the connection. The twin flame relationship is often described as a catalyst for transformation. It accelerates personal growth by bringing unconscious patterns into conscious awareness. But transformation is not something that happens once and then ends. Human beings continue evolving throughout their entire lives. New experiences reveal new aspects of ourselves. Different stages of life bring different emotional challenges. And sometimes, deeper layers of healing only appear when we reach a certain level of awareness. When two twin flames come into union, they create a space of deep emotional intimacy. They are no longer just influencing each other from a distance or through intermittent contact. Now they are sharing daily life. And that closeness naturally intensifies the mirror effect. Imagine two mirrors facing each other. The reflection does not appear once and stop. It continues infinitely, creating deeper and deeper layers of reflection. In a similar way, the twin flame connection can reveal layers of self-awareness that were previously hidden. This does not mean the relationship becomes chaotic or unstable. Instead, it means that the process of growth continues in a more conscious and collaborative way. For example, consider a situation where one partner has a subtle fear of not being good enough. During separation, they may have already worked through many of their insecurities. They may feel more confident and emotionally balanced than they did in the past. But once they enter union, new situations begin to appear. Perhaps their twin flame becomes very focused on a demanding project at work, and temporarily has less time for emotional connection. Suddenly, the old feeling of, "I'm not important enough," may surface again. Not because the other partner is doing something wrong, but because the emotional pattern still exists at a deeper level. In this moment, the twin flame is acting as a mirror, not by intentionally triggering pain, but simply by reflecting the inner belief that still needs attention. Without awareness, this situation could easily turn into conflict. The person might accuse their partner of being distant or uncaring. The partner might feel misunderstood and defensive. But within a conscious twin flame union, the same situation can lead to something entirely different. Instead of reacting automatically, the person might pause and ask themselves an important question. Is this feeling truly about my partner? Or is it revealing something within me? This moment of reflection can transform the entire experience. Rather than projecting the emotional pain outward, the person begins to explore it inwardly. Where did this belief come from? What past experiences created the fear of not being valued? How can this moment become an opportunity for deeper healing? At the same time, the other partner may also be reflecting something within themselves. Perhaps their intense focus on work is connected to their own pattern of avoiding vulnerability. Perhaps they feel safer investing energy into achievements rather than emotional exposure. When both partners approach the situation with awareness, the mirror effect becomes a tool rather than a problem. Instead of creating distance, it creates insight. Another important aspect of the mirror effect in union is that it works in both directions. Each partner reflects something within the other. This means that both individuals continue learning about themselves through the relationship. For example, one partner may naturally express emotions openly and seek deep conversations about feelings. The other partner may have grown up in an environment where emotional expression was discouraged. In daily life, this difference might lead to moments of misunderstanding. One person might think, "Why are you holding everything inside?" The other might feel overwhelmed by the intensity of emotional discussions. But if both partners recognize the mirror dynamic, they can see the situation differently. The emotionally expressive partner may learn patience and respect for different communication styles. The more reserved partner may gradually feel safer exploring emotional vulnerability. Over time, both individuals expand beyond their original patterns. The relationship becomes a space where personal growth happens naturally. This is one of the reasons why the twin flame connection can feel so transformative. It does not allow people to remain completely unchanged. It gently, or sometimes strongly, encourages them to evolve. And this process continues even after union. But it's important to understand something else about the mirror effect. It does not exist to create endless emotional struggle. The purpose of the mirror is awareness. When a reflection appears, it simply shows something that is ready to be seen. Once that awareness is reached, healing becomes possible. Over time, the triggers that once felt overwhelming begin to soften. The emotional reactions become less intense. Both partners develop a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. Instead of reacting impulsively, they respond with greater clarity and compassion. Gradually, the mirror becomes less about exposing wounds and more about supporting growth. The relationship evolves into a place where both people feel safe exploring their inner worlds. They recognize that moments of discomfort are not signs that the connection is failing. They are invitations to grow. In this way, the mirror effect does not weaken the bond between twin flames. It strengthens it. Because each moment of awareness brings the relationship to a deeper level of authenticity. Both partners learn to see each other clearly, not as idealized versions of themselves, but as real human beings who are constantly evolving. And perhaps that is the most beautiful aspect of the mirror effect in union. It reminds both souls that love is not about finding someone who hides your imperfections. It is about finding someone who reflects your truth so clearly that you can finally see yourself and grow beyond the limits you once believed defined you. So even after union, the mirror continues, not as a source of pain, but as a quiet guide leading both partners toward deeper self-awareness, greater compassion, and a love that grows stronger through every layer of reflection. One of the most surprising truths about twin flame union is that conflict does not disappear. In fact, disagreement, tension, and emotional friction can still appear even after both partners come together. For many people, this realization can feel confusing or even discouraging. After all, if two souls are deeply connected at a spiritual level, shouldn't they understand each other perfectly? Shouldn't they always be in harmony? But the reality of any relationship, even a sacred one, is that two people will never experience life in exactly the same way. They have different histories, different emotional patterns, different perspectives shaped by years of personal experience. Union does not erase these differences. Instead, It creates a space where those differences must learn how to coexist. And this is where conflict becomes something very different from what most people imagine. In ordinary relationships, conflict is often seen as a problem to avoid. Many couples fear disagreements because they associate them with instability, rejection, or emotional distance. Some people react by suppressing their feelings, trying to keep the peace at all costs. Others react by becoming defensive or argumentative, turning every disagreement into a struggle to prove who is right. But the twin flame connection invites a different approach. Rather than seeing conflict as a threat, it can become a doorway to deeper awareness. Every disagreement contains information. It reveals something about the emotional landscape of both individuals. It shows where expectations may be misaligned. It exposes unconscious patterns that still influence behavior. In this way, conflict becomes a mirror, another reflection of inner growth waiting to happen. Imagine a simple scenario. Two twin flames are living their lives together after a long period of separation. They have both matured emotionally and spiritually, and their connection feels stable. But one evening, a disagreement arises. Perhaps one partner feels that the other has not been emotionally present lately. They may say something like, "You've seemed distant recently. I feel like you're pulling away." The other partner might respond defensively, "I'm not pulling away. I've just been busy. Why do you always assume something is wrong?" Suddenly, what began as a small concern becomes a tense conversation. Both people feel misunderstood. The emotional atmosphere shifts. In many relationships, this moment would quickly escalate. One partner might shut down emotionally. The other might push harder, trying to force reassurance. Old patterns could take over, leading to frustration or resentment. But within a conscious twin flame union, something different can happen. Instead of reacting automatically, both individuals may begin to notice the deeper layer beneath the disagreement. The first partner may realize that their reaction is connected to an old fear of emotional distance. The second partner may recognize that their defensiveness comes from a lifelong habit of protecting themselves when feeling criticized. Suddenly, the conflict is no longer just about the present moment. It is revealing something deeper within both individuals. This shift in awareness transforms the entire dynamic. Instead of trying to win the argument, both partners begin to explore the experience. What am I really feeling right now? Why did this situation trigger such a strong reaction? What is this moment trying to teach me about myself? When both people approach conflict with curiosity instead of blame, the relationship becomes a space for growth rather than division. This does not mean disagreements always resolve instantly. Sometimes emotions still need time to settle. Sometimes both partners need space to reflect before returning to the conversation. But the intention behind the interaction changes. Instead of trying to prove who is right, both people are working toward understanding. And understanding is the foundation of emotional intimacy. Another important aspect of conflict in a twin flame union is that it often encourages personal responsibility. In many relationships, it can be tempting to blame the other person for emotional discomfort. If you didn't act this way, I wouldn't feel this way. But the twin flame journey consistently challenges that mindset. It invites both partners to examine their internal responses. Why does this situation hurt? What belief or past experience is connected to this reaction? How can I communicate my feelings without projecting blame? This level of self-awareness is not always easy. It requires emotional maturity and honesty. But over time, it creates a healthier dynamic where both partners feel safe expressing themselves. Instead of avoiding difficult conversations, they learn how to navigate them with respect and patience. For example, imagine that one partner values frequent communication and emotional reassurance. The other partner may naturally require more solitude to process their thoughts. Without awareness, this difference could lead to repeated misunderstandings. The first person may feel neglected. The second person may feel overwhelmed. But when both partners approach the situation with openness, they can begin to find balance. They can talk about their needs. They can create boundaries that respect both personalities. The partner who values closeness may learn to trust that space does not mean rejection. The partner who needs solitude may learn to communicate their intentions more clearly. In this way, the conflict becomes an opportunity to strengthen the relationship. It teaches both individuals how to adapt without losing their authenticity. Over time, these experiences build a deeper level of trust. Because each challenge that is faced with honesty becomes proof that the relationship can withstand difficulty. Both partners begin to understand that love is not defined by the absence of conflict. It is defined by the way two people respond to it. Do they withdraw from each other when things become uncomfortable? Or do they lean into the discomfort with the intention of understanding each other more deeply? In a conscious twin flame union, the second path gradually becomes the norm. Conflicts may still arise, but they are no longer viewed as threats to the connection. They are seen as moments where the relationship is asking for greater awareness, greater patience, greater compassion. And perhaps the most important transformation that occurs through this process is the shift from ego to empathy. The ego wants to be right. It wants to defend itself and protect its identity. But empathy seeks understanding. It recognizes that both partners are human beings who carry their own histories, fears, and emotional sensitivities. When empathy becomes stronger than ego, conflict begins to lose its destructive power. Instead of creating distance, it opens the door for deeper communication. And through that communication, the relationship becomes stronger. This is why conflict within a twin flame union can actually serve a sacred purpose. It helps both partners evolve. It encourages emotional honesty. It teaches patience, accountability, and mutual respect. In many ways, the presence of conflict proves that the relationship is alive and dynamic. Two individuals are interacting, learning, and growing together. If the connection were perfectly smooth at all times, it might mean that important emotions were being suppressed rather than explored. But when conflict is approached with awareness, it becomes one of the most powerful tools for transformation. It reminds both partners that love is not about perfection. It is about presence, the willingness to stay engaged even when things feel uncomfortable, the courage to speak honestly and listen openly, and the commitment to grow not just individually but together. In this sense, every challenge within the relationship becomes part of the shared journey, a step toward deeper understanding, a step toward greater emotional maturity, and ultimately, a step toward a love that is not fragile, but resilient. A love that continues evolving with every experience the two souls share. Sometimes the best way to understand the truth about twin flame union is through a story. Not a fairy tale, not a perfectly scripted romance, but a story that reflects the real emotional depth, complexity, and growth that often accompanies this kind of connection. Imagine two people named Daniel and Elena. They met years ago in a way that neither of them could easily explain. From the very beginning, there was an unusual sense of familiarity between them. Conversations flowed effortlessly. Even silence between them felt comfortable, as if they had known each other far longer than the few weeks they had actually spent together. Daniel often felt as though Elena could see through him, not in a judgmental way but in a way that made him feel deeply understood. Elena experienced something similar. Being around Daniel stirred emotions she had rarely allowed herself to feel. Vulnerability, excitement, and a strange sense of recognition she couldn't fully describe. But as often happens in twin flame connections, the intensity of that bond soon began to reveal deeper emotional layers. Daniel had spent most of his life maintaining emotional control. He was responsible, disciplined, and focused on building a successful career. Expressing feelings openly was something he had never been particularly comfortable with. Elena, on the other hand, had always valued emotional openness. She believed that honest communication was essential for a relationship to grow. When she felt something, she wanted to talk about it, understand it, and share it. At first, these differences seemed minor. But as their connection deepened, those differences became more visible. When Elena wanted to talk about the emotional depth of their relationship, Daniel sometimes felt overwhelmed. He cared about her deeply, but he struggled to articulate feelings he had spent years keeping private. In response, he occasionally withdrew to regain a sense of internal balance. For Elena, those moments of withdrawal felt painful. She began to wonder if she had imagined the depth of their connection. The more she sought reassurance, the more pressure Daniel felt. Eventually, the dynamic reached a breaking point. Daniel decided to step away from the relationship, believing that he needed space to understand his own emotions. Elena was heartbroken. The separation felt abrupt and confusing. How could a connection that had felt so powerful suddenly collapse? For a long time, Elena tried to make sense of what had happened. She replayed conversations in her mind, wondering if she had said something wrong or asked for too much. But gradually, the experience began to lead her inward. Instead of focusing only on Daniel's behavior, she started exploring her own emotional patterns. Why had his withdrawal triggered such deep fear? Why did she feel such a strong need for reassurance in the relationship? Through reflection, therapy, and personal growth, Elena began to recognize something important. Much of her emotional intensity was connected to childhood experiences where she had felt emotionally unsupported. The fear of losing Daniel had awakened that old wound. Understanding this did not erase the pain, but it gave her a new perspective. The journey became less about waiting for Daniel to return and more about strengthening her relationship with herself. Meanwhile, Daniel was going through his own process. During the time apart, he began to realize how deeply the connection with Elena had affected him. Her emotional honesty had forced him to confront parts of himself he had long avoided. He started questioning why vulnerability felt so threatening. Why did expressing emotions feel uncomfortable? Why had his instinct been to withdraw rather than communicate? Through introspection, Daniel recognized that he had spent much of his life equating emotional openness with weakness. But Elena's presence had challenged that belief. Slowly, he began learning how to connect with his feelings rather than suppress them. Months turned into years. Both Daniel and Elena continued growing individually. They were not waiting for reunion in the same way they once had. Instead, they focused on building fulfilling lives. Elena pursued creative work that allowed her to express herself more freely. Daniel began prioritizing emotional awareness alongside his professional ambitions. Neither of them knew if they would ever see each other again. But the connection had changed them both. Then one day, quite unexpectedly, their paths crossed again. There was no dramatic orchestration, no cinematic moment. Just a quiet coincidence that brought them into the same place after years apart. First, the reunion felt surreal. Both of them had changed. Both had matured. Yet the familiar sense of recognition was still there. They began talking again, slowly, cautiously. This time, the dynamic felt different. Elena no longer felt the same urgency to analyze every emotional detail of the connection. She had developed a stronger sense of inner stability. Daniel, meanwhile, was more willing to express his feelings than he had ever been before. But even after coming back into each other's lives, the relationship was not instantly perfect. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced. There were moments when Elena felt the familiar fear of distance. There were times when Daniel still needed solitude to process his emotions. The difference now was awareness. Instead of reacting automatically, both of them had learned how to pause and communicate more openly. When Elena felt anxious, she expressed it without accusation. When Daniel needed space, he explained his feelings rather than disappearing. These small changes transformed the dynamic. The relationship was no longer driven by unconscious patterns. It became a partnership built on honesty and mutual growth. Over time, Daniel and Elena gradually moved into a stable union. But it did not resemble the fairy tale version of love that many people imagine. There were still disagreements. There were still moments of emotional vulnerability. Life continued bringing challenges, career decisions, family responsibilities, personal aspirations. Yet something fundamental had changed. Both of them understood that the purpose of their connection was not to escape difficulty. It was to evolve through it. When conflicts appeared, they approached them as opportunities to understand each other better. When emotional triggers surfaced, they explored them with curiosity instead of fear. Their love became less about intensity and more about presence. Some days were quiet. Some days were joyful. Some days required patience and effort. But all of those experiences became part of the same journey. A journey where two individuals continued growing side by side. Looking at their relationship from the outside, someone might not immediately recognize it as a spiritual love story. There were no constant dramatic gestures. No endless romantic scenes. Just two people navigating life together with awareness and care. And yet, beneath the surface, the connection carried a profound depth. Because both Daniel and Elena had learned something essential. Twin flame union is not about finding someone who completes you. It is about meeting someone who challenges you to become more conscious, more authentic, and more compassionate. It is not a perfect ending. It is the beginning of a shared path where both souls continue evolving together. And perhaps that is the most realistic and meaningful version of the twin flame story. Not a fairy tale, but a journey of transformation where love grows stronger through every lesson learned along the way. After everything that has been said about twin flame union, the myths, the expectations, the challenges, an important question naturally arises. If union is not a fairy tale ending, if it is not constant romance, if it still includes triggers, growth, and occasional conflict, then what is the true purpose of it? Why do twin flames go through such an intense journey only to arrive at something that still requires effort, awareness, and emotional maturity? To understand this, we have to shift our perspective completely, because the purpose of union was never meant to be comfort alone. It was meant to be transformation. Many people approach the twin flame journey believing that the ultimate reward will be the relationship itself. They imagine union as the moment when they finally receive the love they have been longing for. But the deeper truth is that the journey is not only about receiving love, it is about becoming capable of sustaining a higher level of love. And that requires growth. During the separation phase, most of the transformation happens individually. Each person is pushed to confront their own emotional wounds, limiting beliefs, and unconscious patterns. Sometimes this process is painful. It can feel like the connection has shattered the life they once knew. But through that process, something important begins to change. People start learning how to rely on themselves emotionally. They develop greater self-awareness. They discover strengths they never realized they had. Many individuals on the twin flame path begin practicing self-love, setting boundaries, and creating a life that feels meaningful even without the presence of their counterpart. These lessons are not accidental. They are preparation. Because when union finally happens, the relationship requires two individuals who are capable of standing on their own. Not two people who are searching for completion, but two people who are already whole enough to grow together. In this sense, union is not the destination of the journey. It is the beginning of a new stage. Before union, the focus is primarily internal. After union, the focus expands outward. Now the connection becomes a shared field where both individuals continue evolving. Not just individually, but collectively. Think of it like two rivers flowing separately for a long time. Each river develops its own path, carving through landscapes, shaping the terrain around it. But eventually those rivers meet. When they merge, they do not stop flowing. They become a larger river, moving forward with greater strength and depth. Twin flame union works in a similar way. Both individuals bring their experiences, their lessons, and their growth into the relationship. And together, they create a dynamic that continues to evolve. One of the most important aspects of this evolution is awareness. In many ordinary relationships, people often operate from unconscious habits. They repeat patterns learned from family, past partners, or societal expectations without fully questioning them. Arguments follow predictable cycles. Emotional needs remain unspoken. Personal growth may occur slowly or inconsistently. But the twin flame connection rarely allows unconscious patterns to remain hidden for long. Because both individuals are highly sensitive to each other's emotional states. If one partner withdraws, the other feels it. If one partner is carrying unresolved tension, it subtly affects the dynamic between them. This heightened awareness creates both challenge and opportunity. The challenge is that avoidance becomes difficult. The opportunity is that growth becomes almost inevitable. Every interaction invites deeper honesty. Every emotional response becomes a chance to understand oneself more clearly. Over time, the relationship becomes a powerful environment for conscious evolution. But the purpose of union extends beyond the two individuals themselves. Many people who experience a twin flame connection eventually feel a desire to contribute something meaningful to the world. This does not necessarily mean they must pursue a dramatic or public mission. Sometimes the impact is subtle. They may inspire others through the way they communicate. They may create art, build communities, or offer guidance to people navigating similar emotional journeys. Other times, the purpose becomes more visible. Some twin flames collaborate on creative projects, humanitarian efforts, or spiritual work that reflects their shared values. But regardless of the specific path, the connection often encourages both individuals to live with greater authenticity. They are less interested in superficial success, and more focused on creating lives that align with their deeper truth. This shift happens because the twin flame journey tends to dissolve many illusions about life. People begin to see that external achievements alone cannot create lasting fulfillment. They recognize the importance of emotional awareness, meaningful connection, and personal integrity. And when two individuals share that perspective, their union becomes more than a romantic relationship. It becomes a partnership in growth. Another important aspect of the purpose of union is balance. Many spiritual teachings describe the twin flame dynamic as the integration of two complementary energies, often referred to as divine masculine and divine feminine. These energies are not strictly tied to gender. Instead, they represent different qualities within human consciousness. The divine masculine often relates to direction, structure, and action. The divine feminine relates to intuition, emotional depth, and receptivity. During the early stages of the twin flame journey, these energies can feel imbalanced. One partner may be more focused on emotional exploration. The other may resist vulnerability. One may pursue the connection intensely while the other withdraws. But as both individuals grow, these energies gradually become more integrated within each person. When union occurs, the relationship can begin reflecting a healthier balance. Action and intuition support each other. Emotional expression and stability coexist. The relationship becomes a place where both energies can flow harmoniously. This balance does not appear overnight. It develops through continuous awareness and mutual respect. But over time, it creates a relationship dynamic that feels both grounded and spiritually aligned. Perhaps the most profound purpose of union is the opportunity to practice love as a conscious choice. In the early stages of attraction, love often feels effortless because it is driven by excitement and emotional chemistry. But long-term relationships require something deeper. They require commitment. Not just commitment to the other person, but commitment to personal growth. In a twin flame union, this commitment becomes especially meaningful. Both partners understand that the relationship will continue revealing new lessons. They accept that growth does not stop. And instead of fearing that process, they embrace it. They learn that love is not simply a feeling that appears when everything is easy. It is an ongoing practice. It is the willingness to listen, even when conversations are difficult. The willingness to support each other during moments of uncertainty. The willingness to evolve together instead of retreating into old habits. In this way, union becomes a living expression of conscious love. Not perfect, not static, but alive. Every experience, joyful or challenging, adds another layer to the connection. Every lesson strengthens the foundation of the relationship. And through that process, both individuals continue becoming more authentic versions of themselves. So the true purpose of twin flame union is not simply to bring two people together. It is to create a space where two souls can keep growing, learning, and evolving side by side. A relationship that does not end the journey, but expands it into something deeper, more meaningful, and far more transformative than the fairy tale most people once imagined. When people imagine a perfect love story, they often picture something flawless. No misunderstandings, no emotional tension, no moments of doubt or vulnerability. In this imagined version of love, two people fit together effortlessly, like pieces of a puzzle that never shift or change. Their connection is smooth, predictable, and permanently harmonious. For a long time, many people expect twin flame union to look exactly like that. After all, if two souls are set to share such a profound spiritual bond, shouldn't their relationship be free from the imperfections that affect ordinary partnerships? But the deeper truth about sacred connections is something far more interesting. Their beauty does not come from perfection. It comes from authenticity. And authenticity always includes imperfection. To understand why this matters, we have to look at how most people define love in the beginning. In the early stages of attraction, it is natural to see the other person through a kind of idealized lens. Emotions are intense, and both individuals often focus on the qualities that draw them together. During this phase, differences may seem small or even charming. Flaws are easy to overlook. But as a relationship evolves, both people begin to see each other more clearly. They notice habits. They observe emotional patterns. They recognize the parts of the other person that are still growing or learning. For some relationships, this stage can create disappointment. the illusion fades and people may feel that something has been lost. But in a conscious relationship, especially a twin flame union, the removal of illusion is not a loss. It is an opportunity. Because once the fantasy disappears, what remains is the truth of who both individuals really are. And that truth is where genuine intimacy begins. Imagine two people who have reached union after years of personal growth and emotional transformation. They no longer expect each other to be perfect. They understand that both of them are still evolving. This understanding changes the way they approach the relationship. Instead of demanding perfection, they begin practicing acceptance. Acceptance does not mean ignoring unhealthy behavior or avoiding difficult conversations. It means recognizing that every human being carries a unique mixture of strengths and vulnerabilities. Both partners have qualities that make the relationship beautiful. Both also have areas where they are still learning. When this awareness becomes part of the relationship, something remarkable happens. The connection becomes more honest. There is less pressure to perform or pretend. Both individuals feel freer to express their true thoughts and emotions. And this honesty creates a deeper form of trust. Because trust does not come from believing that someone will never make mistakes. It comes from knowing that even when mistakes happen, both people are willing to face them together. In a twin flame union, this dynamic can feel especially powerful. The connection itself often encourages transparency. Hidden emotions have a way of surfacing. Unspoken concerns eventually find their way into conversation. While this can sometimes feel uncomfortable, it also prevents the relationship from becoming superficial. Both partners are constantly invited to engage with each other at a deeper level. Consider a simple moment in everyday life. Perhaps one partner has had a stressful day and becomes quiet or withdrawn. In a relationship built on unrealistic expectations, the other person might immediately assume the worst. They might think, something is wrong with our relationship, or they must be losing interest. But in a conscious union, the response may look very different. Instead of reacting with fear, the partner might approach the situation with curiosity and care. They might ask gently, "You seem a little quiet today. Is everything okay?" That small moment of awareness can prevent misunderstanding from growing into conflict. It allows both people to remain connected, even when emotions are complex. Over time, these small interactions accumulate. They build a relationship that feels stable not because it avoids difficulty, but because both individuals know how to navigate it together. Another important aspect of an imperfect sacred connection is the role of accountability. In many relationships, people instinctively defend themselves when conflict appears. They protect their pride. They search for ways to prove that the other person is responsible for the problem. But in a mature twin flame union, both partners gradually learn something different. They learn to take responsibility for their own emotional reactions. If a disagreement occurs, they reflect on their part in the situation. They ask themselves questions like, "What am I feeling right now? Did my reaction come from the present moment, or from an older emotional pattern? How can I express my perspective without dismissing the other person's experience?" This level of self-awareness requires courage. It asks both individuals to look honestly at themselves, but it also creates a relationship where growth is constantly encouraged. Instead of repeating the same patterns over and over again, both partners evolve. The relationship becomes a shared process of learning. And in that process, imperfection becomes something valuable rather than threatening. Because each challenge offers another chance to deepen understanding. Another reason imperfection can be beautiful in a sacred connection is that it makes the love between two people more real. Perfection is often distant and fragile. If everything must always be flawless, the relationship can feel tense, like something that might break under pressure. But when both partners accept that mistakes will happen, the atmosphere changes. The relationship becomes more relaxed. There is room for vulnerability. There is space for learning. Love becomes less about maintaining an image and more about supporting each other through the natural complexity of life. This is especially important because life itself is unpredictable. Even the strongest relationships will encounter external challenges, career changes, health concerns, family responsibilities, unexpected events that require resilience and adaptability. A relationship built on the expectation of perfection may struggle during these moments. But a relationship that has already embraced imperfection is often much stronger. Both partners understand that growth is continuous. They trust that the connection can adapt as circumstances change. In this way, the sacred nature of the twin flame bond does not remove human complexity. It transforms the way that complexity is experienced. Instead of seeing imperfections as flaws in the relationship, both individuals begin to see them as part of the journey. Every misunderstanding becomes a chance to communicate more clearly. Every emotional trigger becomes an invitation for self-reflection. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to strengthen the foundation of the relationship. And through this process, something deeper than perfection begins to emerge. Authenticity. Authenticity means showing up as your true self, without hiding the parts that are still learning or growing. It means allowing the other person to see your vulnerability while also honoring theirs. When two people can do this consistently, their connection becomes remarkably resilient, because it is no longer based on an illusion. It is based on reality, and reality, when approached with awareness and compassion, can be far more meaningful than any fairy tale. So the beauty of a twin flame union is not found in the absence of flaws. It is found in the way two people navigate those flaws together. With patience, with honesty, with a shared commitment to growth. This kind of love does not try to escape imperfection, transforms it, and in doing so, it becomes something deeply human and deeply sacred at the same time. Not a perfect story, but a living, evolving connection where both souls continue discovering new depths of love, awareness, and understanding together. When many people imagine twin flame union, they picture a final destination. A moment where the long journey finally ends. A reunion filled with relief, peace, romance, and a sense that everything has finally fallen into place. For years, sometimes decades, twin flames endure separation, emotional storms, karmic lessons, and intense inner transformation. So it's only natural to believe that once union arrives, the struggle is over, that the story reaches its perfect ending. But what if twin flame union is not an ending at all? What if it is actually the beginning of something far deeper? The truth is that union is not the final chapter of the journey. It is the beginning of a new stage, one that requires even greater awareness, emotional maturity, and spiritual responsibility. Because the real purpose of a twin flame connection is not simply to find each other. It is to evolve together. And evolution never truly ends. Union is not a finish line. In traditional love stories, the moment two people finally come together marks the end of the narrative. The movie fades out. The storybook closes. The characters ride off into the sunset. But twin flame connections don't follow that script. Union is not the moment where the story stops. It is the moment where a new story begins. Before union, much of the work happens internally. Both individuals go through periods of awakening, healing, and self-discovery. They confront old wounds, release unhealthy attachments, and learn to stand in their own power. Separation often forces both souls to grow independently, but when union occurs, the growth doesn't stop. Instead, it shifts into a shared evolution. Now the journey becomes about learning how to grow together. The evolution of love. The love between twin flames is powerful, but it is not static. It changes. It expands, deepens over time. In the beginning, the connection may feel overwhelming. Many people describe their first encounter with their twin flame as electrifying, almost otherworldly. There is recognition. There is intensity. There is the feeling that you have known this person forever. But over time, the relationship evolves into something more grounded, more stable, more real. The passionate spark is still there, but it becomes integrated into everyday life. This evolution is important because true love is not meant to remain frozen in one emotional state. Real love grows. It becomes more patient, more understanding, more compassionate. And this is exactly what the twin flame journey is designed to teach. Growth does not stop in union. One of the biggest misunderstandings about twin flame relationships is the idea that personal growth ends once the two people reunite. In reality, growth continues for the rest of your life. Union simply creates a new environment where that growth happens together rather than separately. Imagine two people who have spent years working on themselves, learning emotional awareness, healing childhood wounds, and discovering their purpose. When they finally reunite, they bring all of that growth into the relationship. But life continues to present new lessons. Career changes, family responsibilities, unexpected challenges, moments of doubt, moments of transformation. The difference is that now they face those experiences side by side. And that shared growth strengthens the bond in ways that fantasy never could. The spiritual purpose of twin flame union. Twin flame connections are often described as spiritual partnerships, not just romantic relationships. This is because their purpose extends beyond personal happiness. Many people who experience union find that their relationship begins to influence the world around them. They inspire others. They support healing in their communities. They help people understand deeper forms of love and connection. Sometimes this happens through creative work, sometimes through teaching, counseling, or guiding others, and sometimes simply through the way they live their lives. When two people grow into authentic, balanced versions of themselves, their relationship becomes a powerful example of conscious love. In this way, twin flame union often carries a larger purpose. It becomes a partnership that contributes something meaningful to the world. The strength of two whole individuals. A healthy twin flame union is not built on dependency. It is built on wholeness. Both individuals learn to stand firmly in their own identity. They maintain their individuality, their dreams, and their personal paths. But they also choose to support each other. This balance is essential, because the strongest relationships are not formed when two incomplete people try to fill each other's emptiness. They are formed when two whole individuals come together and create something even greater. In a true union, both partners respect each other's growth. They encourage each other's evolution. They celebrate each other's individuality. And that mutual respect creates a foundation that can withstand life's inevitable challenges. Love is a daily practice. Another important truth about twin flame union is that love becomes a practice, not just an emotion. Feelings naturally rise and fall over time. Every relationship experiences moments of closeness and moments of distance. But what sustains the connection is the choice to keep showing up, to communicate honestly, to listen, to grow, to forgive, to support each other even during difficult periods. In this sense, love becomes an ongoing commitment, a conscious decision made every day. And when two people continue choosing each other in this way, their bond grows stronger with time. The beauty of an imperfect journey. Perhaps the most important realization about twin flame union is that its beauty does not come from perfection. It comes from authenticity, from the willingness to grow together, from the courage to face life honestly. No relationship is flawless, but relationships that embrace growth can become incredibly powerful. Twin flames are not meant to escape the challenges of life. They are meant to face those challenges with greater awareness and love. And through that process, their connection becomes deeper and more meaningful. A message for those still on the journey. If you are still walking the twin flame path, it can sometimes feel overwhelming. The separation stages can be painful. The uncertainty can be exhausting. You may question whether union will ever happen. But remember this: the most important part of the journey is not reaching union. It is becoming the person you are meant to be. Every lesson you learn, every wound you heal, every moment of self-discovery, all of it prepares you for a deeper level of love. And whether union arrives sooner or later, the transformation you experience along the way is already changing your life. Twin flame union is not a fairy tale ending. It is not a perfect romance. It is not a magical moment where life suddenly becomes easy. Instead, it is something far more meaningful. It is a partnership built on growth, on honesty, on spiritual evolution. Two souls who have walked separate paths of transformation finally choosing to walk forward together. And perhaps that is the most powerful form of love that exists. Not the love that promises perfection, but the love that inspires two people to keep becoming better, together. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own journey. What lessons has the twin flame path taught you so far? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story may inspire someone else who is walking the same path. And if you want to explore more insights about the twin flame journey, spiritual awakening, and conscious relationships, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join this growing community of seekers. Your journey matters. And sometimes the most powerful transformations begin exactly where the fairy tale ends.